All houses are fragile, tired, seemingly at peace. But beneath masks of order, unrest rises. The illusion of peace is its own lie. In the shadows of politics, a new god stirs beneath the remnant, one that watches but does not yet speak. Episode 1, Chapter 1, The Ash-Woken Banner. Scene: the charred spires. Seat of House Veltharn. The wind in the charred spires never whispered. It howled, not like a storm, but like a chorus of things burned too long to remember what silence felt like. The towers of obsidian stood like broken tusks against a sky the color of forged iron. Beneath them, lava terraces pulsed dimly with ember light, casting eerie glows across the ashen slopes of Aether-Zarr restored, the capital of House Veltharn. A lone rider climbed the ridge toward the flame balcony, where Evangeline Veltharn, the unburned Duchess, watched the sunrise. If the smoldering horizon could still be called that. Her cloak was stitched from phoenix-wrought silk, its folds flickering with an inner warmth. Her eyes, crimson gold, did not flinch against the wind that peeled flesh from lesser beings. She heard the rider before she saw him, hooves that struck fire with every step. The beast was no mere mount, it was an ember wolf, scarlet-eyed with veins of magma coursing under translucent fur. The rider dismounted with reverence. "Ash Mother," he said, kneeling and pressing a fire-marked scroll into her hand. From the scarlands, they stir again. She unfurled it. The symbol seared into the parchment was unmistakable. A broken sword through an hourglass. House Varnix. She didn't speak at first, only stared westward toward the shimmering edges where the charred spires met the ruins of the old empire. Then she turned. Episode 1, Chapter 2, The Weight of Flame. The halls of Aether-Zarr were unlike any palace built by mortals. They did not rise from stone, but were coaxed from cooled obsidian veins, bent and forged by fire singers over generations. Each wall breathed residual heat. Each corner whispered with the memories of things burned to ash, but never quite gone. The day began as it always did in the House of Veltharn, with silence, not ceremony. Evangeline stood at the edge of the flame basin, a circular trench of ever-burning coals beneath the throne itself. Here at dawn, the house meditated, not in words, but in heat. For Veltharn, tradition held that only by facing fire each day could one remember their origin and their debt. Ash is not an ending, her mother used to say. It's the soil of the next fire. The world had changed, but the creed had not. Around her, life in Aether-Zarr moved in quiet discipline. Ashguard initiates filed silently into the pyre hall, where their scars would be sealed by glowing ember ink. Each line a vow. Flame charmers harvested ember vine from lava terraces, their bare hands immune to heat, thanks to centuries-old symbiosis. In the flare yards, blacksmiths wove flame into steel, whispering war songs to molten blades that thirsted for ash. And from the sky balconies, One could see the Drake riders launching from the wind channels, riders clad in ember mail, their beasts trailing coils of smoke as they patrolled the fire-scarred borderlands. But not all were warriors. House Veltharn, heir to the house, spent his mornings in the Hall of Cinders, beneath flame crystals that refracted memory. He was 9, but age meant little when fire had already burned through your bloodline. His tutor, Yasel, guided him through the rituals of naming, pages of forgotten names etched in soot. Veltharn's law decreed that every warrior must know not only who they were, but all who came before. Why do we carry their names? Sarathour asked. Yasel smiled, pale eyes glowing faintly through her blindness. Because fire forgets. We don't. In the Ember Kitchens, meals were simple. Sun locust stew, dried lava lily petals, smoked volcanic smoldered again. Unburned, but angry. Chapter 3. Ash beneath his heels. The path beyond the Ember Yards was forbidden to initiates. It wound along a spine of scorched obsidian cliffs and led toward the shale edge, where the lava terraces cracked into darkness. Nothing grew there, nothing ever had. The flame drakes refused to land, and even the ember wolves snarled at its scent. But Sarathour Veltharn did not care for boundaries. He walked alone, barefoot, as tradition demanded. The boy prince was still a child in the eyes of most, but in the lore of the Veltharn, he had already crossed 3 trials: the naming flame, the ember rite, and the shadow vigil. His body bore the marks of it, light scars along his ribs, runes beneath his tongue, and a faint glow behind his eyes that only the fire seers could understand. He was the son of Evangeline and Veilwrath, the legacy of flame and dragon shadow, and sometimes the stone itself seemed to recoil from him. He stepped carefully between glassy ridges, the volcanic crust snapping underfoot. Each crack echoed with something deeper, not just sound, memory. He heard it again, that faint calling. It wasn't a voice, not really, more like pressure, an idea trying to be born. He paused at a pillar of heat-warped basalt and pressed a hand to its side. The rock hissed, then whispered, "Brother." Sarathour flinched. It wasn't the voice of a man or a god. It was himself, older, echoing back from a time that had not yet happened. Back at the citadel, Ember matron Wissel suddenly stirred from her trance. "He's crossed the spine," she said, rising with unnatural speed. Evangeline across the ritual chamber turned, eyes narrowing. "Alone?" "Yes, and something sees him." In the hollow beneath the basalt arch, Sarathour reached the edge of the world as he knew it. There, carved into the stone, was a symbol not found in any Veltharn codex: an hourglass, bleeding fire, a sword, a broken eye. He had never seen it, and yet he knew it. The mark of House Vehlon. Before he could speak, the ground quaked. A figure moved in the smoke, iron-bound and hooded, dragging a blade that sparked with every step. Not an enemy, not a ghost, a message. The figure lowered their hood. A woman, masked in ash. Chapter 4. The Council Beneath Flame Glass. The Hall of Embers was carved from the fused spine of an ancient drake, its ribs arched into a dome of molten glass, hardened by time. On clear nights, the ceiling glowed with the slow crawl of constellations, scorched into the sky itself. Tonight, however, there was no sky, only heat haze and the smell of prophecy. Burned too soon. Evangeline Veltharn entered without ceremony. She did not wait to be seated. The fire knew her shape. Around her stood the 4 pillars of the small council, Flame Warden Thalos, his armor etched with battle prayers in ember steel. Ember Matron Ysel, already mid-chant, her blindfold of stitched flame moths, trembling. Red Alchemist Rink, sleeves rolled, arms scarred from his own experiments, smiling like all good madness does. Tutor Darren, now grown gray with years, but guardian still to the boy who would ignite kingdoms. The fire pit in the center bloomed suddenly, without touch or flint. A sign. He found the sigil, said Evangeline, eyes fixed on the blue flame licking the pit's edge. House Vehlon stirs beneath the stone. Thalos grunted. Cael'Rhun won't move alone, not unless the crucible's cracked. We sealed that forge 3 winters ago. Ysel whispered. Time fractures differently when it walks in Cael'Rhun's bones. Rink smiled wider. Perhaps he never stopped moving, only paused, waiting for the right air to twitch. Darren, uncharacteristically solemn, turned to Evangeline. And the boy? Evangeline's eyes burned faintly. Sarathor felt the pull. He followed it, and he saw her. The council stilled. No name needed. The shade witness, Ysel intoned. Ash Walker, flame split soul. She returns when the fire forgets its purpose. Then we must remember for it, Thalos said, gripping the hilt of his fire lance. Outside the flame glass hall, the city pulsed with old rituals. Ember lamps were dimmed. Fire drakes were grounded. Bells rang in the tone of rising cinder. Inside, Evangeline drew her cloak tighter. Summon the Ash Guard, all of them. Call House Cael'Rhun, House Talva. Chapter 5. Through the Ember Helm. Name, Gating Talva. Rank, Ember Hound of House Veltharn. Order, Ash Guard. 3rd Legion, Flame Channel Corps. Post, Borderline Watch. Shard Point Outpost, Eastern Ember Ridge. The world, through a flame-etched visor, was never truly still. Even in silence, the heat shimmered. Rocks crawled in place. Shadows twisted backward. And to Gating Talva, this was the only truth that mattered. He stood guard at the edge of the known lands, just past the last of the fertile ember terraces, where the obsidian cliffs dropped into the bleeding cleft. Here, fire thinned, and old things listened. His armor bore the black lacquer sigil of House Veltharn, lined with threads of phoenix hair that seared any blade not fire-bound. A half-scar traced his jaw, left by his initiation through the ritual of ash breathing. The moment he was granted the spear that now hummed softly against his back. Most thought ash gods were just loyal fire dogs, but Caden listened. On this night, the skies had thickened to the color of scorched copper, and that meant change. He leaned against a basalt pylon, one hand over his breastplate where his ember brand pulsed faintly. He could feel it through the metal, unrest moving like a distant drumbeat in his bones. Then came the messenger, a child from House Cael'Rhun's lower bloodline, barely old enough for his second scar, breathless, carrying a scroll marked not with wax, but with burned flesh of. And when Evangeline Veltharn summoned her ash god to the Ember Hall, Kaiden did not come as a blade. He came as a judge, and the lady, in her fire-crowned throne, looked at him not as a mere soldier, but as someone who remembered when flame was feared. Chapter 6. When Embers Listen. Location: the Ember Hall, core of Aether-Zarr. Perspective: Kaiden Talva, Emberhound. Ashgard. Time: night of the first summons. The Ember Hall rose like a fang of black crystal from the heart of Aether-Zarr. Its outer walls still whispered heat from the forging when Velrath and Evangeline sealed flame into stone. No one entered the hall casually, not even those born of fire. But tonight, the Ashguard filled it to the brim. Ranks of battle-scarred warriors stood in silence, spears upright like a field of steel thorns. Their armor shimmered with active flame thread, each breath releasing faint pulses of reddish smoke. Kaiden stood at the forefront of the third line, not by rank, by proximity. He had stood there during the Frost incursion of Year 2. He stood there when the Obsidian Tithe was called, and now when the Phoenix Duchess summoned truth, she entered with no fanfare. Evangeline Veltharn, clad in a black and gold mantle of phoenix feathers that shimmered between coal and firelight. Her steps left smoldering glyphs on the stone. Behind her trailed Ember Matron Isel, blind but seeing. At her side, Sarathor, 9 winters old, cloaked in half-shadow and ringed in ancient runes. Kaiden bowed. "Lady Veltharn," he said. Her gaze passed over the assembled guards. "You are not here to march. Not yet." Her voice crackled like coal breaking under pressure. "You are here to listen. For before we raise blades, we must decide what must be remembered and what must be burned." A hush fell. Evangeline raised her hand, and a circular brazier at the center of the hall roared to life, not with orange or red, but cold flame, blue, flickering backward. "The flame of Varnix has returned," she said, "and with it, the prophecy no one dared write." The room rippled. Ysel stepped forward. Her blindfold trembled. Her voice shook. "I saw the hourglass split. I saw the bone forged awaken. And I saw the phoenix die beneath a sky of frost." A warrior gasped. Someone muttered, "Impossible." Evangeline silenced them with a glance. "We believed we won the last war." When the Ashguard dispersed, and the stars above Aether-Zarr burned in fractured constellations, he knelt beside the ancient embers near the old forge and whispered not a prayer, a question. "What if we're the enemy now?" Chapter 7. The Dagger and the Web. Location: High Spire Crownhold, Metropolis 10, Inner District. Perspective: Thriss Eryndor, Prince Regent of the Ruby Court. Time: 2 nights after Veltharn's Ashguard Council. The spires of High Spire never slept. Their glass-bone windows reflected a perpetual dusk. The city's skyline lit by ley fires and whispered memory. From above, Metropolis 10 looked like a dying star's last flicker, its once holy avenues swallowed by crawling fog and blood-glass overgrowth. From below, it felt like a lung built from veins. At its center stood the ruby court, throne hollowed and still scented with centuries of power, betrayal, and the incense of forgotten rites. Thres Eryndor, self-styled Prince Regent, stood in the throne chamber. He did not sit. The ruby throne was not truly empty. Oriana's essence still pulsed within the dagger, embedded at its heart, glass wrapped in crimson root veins that grew like nerves through the chamber's floor. Tonight, the dagger whispered, "They wake the fire again." He did not answer aloud. He never did. Behind him, the crimson nun stepped from the shadows, her face veiled, her breath scented with black honey and opium. Maskrite Cael'Rhun entered from the opposite alcove, his mirror face rippling. Veltharn calls their banners, Cael'Rhun murmured. Ash god move beneath the cleft. Thres turned, his robes of obsidian velvet trailed behind like spilled ink. A single ruby hung over his brow, blinking with the light of embedded memory. "Let them march," Thres said. "Let them believe flame still answers to loyalty." The nun's voice was a rasp. "You dream of her, don't you?" He turned sharply, but didn't deny it. "She is not dead," he said. "Only elsewhere, in blood, in blade, in me." He clenched his gloved hand. Veltharn thinks truth is theirs to shape. We remember otherwise. Chapter 8. Where threads cross in silence. Location: High Spire Crownhold. Inner Metropolis 10. Eryndor. Sky Bastion. House Cael'Rhun. Tide-locked hall. Half-sunken court. House Vehlon. Perspectives. Thres Eryndor, Prince Regent of House Eryndor. Sabrine Cael'Rhun, exiled archivist. Aether-Zarr Vehlon, the sea-dreamed one. The guttering flame of the web in the lower catacombs, beneath the ruby throne, where lay wounds in the earth bled red light. The ritual engine began to pulse again after decades of dormancy. A living machine etched from bone metal and regret. It whispered old names with the breath of ghosts. Thres Eryndor descended alone, the thick hem of his memory-woven cloak dragging across the bone-glass floor. The engine greeted him with a convulsion. Words bloomed in the air, written in living blood vapors. Vessel located. Fire Herald Sun. Thres narrowed his eyes. Sarathor. The machine confirmed. Seed of paradox detected. Cycle collapse estimated. 32 crowns. He touched the engine's core, a knot of spinal glass, taken from the lost city of Cael'Rhun during the Obsidian Schism, and the veiled hands activated. From hidden alcoves, the assassins slithered, hooded, mirrored, faceless. Their voices were never heard, but their movements wrote commands into the air with ink thread. Thress turned slowly to them. Veltharn thinks the prophecy still belongs to them. His voice echoed like a blade scraping over velvet. We will remind them in Eryndor, sky of ruins, far above in the freezing wind-choked heights of Eryndor. The floating libraries moaned like dying leviathans. House Cael'Rhun, now draped in ash-gray scholar robes trimmed with memory ink, sat at the edge of a broken spire. Her fingers traced a scroll, half burned, its edges still humming with embedded spell code. Wind licked her cheek like a dog without affection. Behind her, the rune mason Varian approached cautiously. "You've been here since second moonrise." Sabrine's voice was soft. "They woke the ritual engine." He froze. "Confirmed," she nodded. Her gaze never left the half-melted scroll. "The web tightens again. And we," she paused, placing her hand over her own heart, where Aldrich once traced a star map. "We are no longer observers. The law seer forbade involvement," Varian warned. "The wind speaks of neutrality." She turned slowly, the ink in her eyes catching the sun's frostlight. "Then the wind is a coward." From the distant cloud scar, a familiar sound trembled, the call of a sky worm, riderless, circling Eryndor. Sabrine stood, "Prepare a sky message for House Vehlon. If Eryndor moves, they will be next." Varian bowed and fled. Alone, Sabrine pulled a worn cloth from her satchel. Wrapped inside, Aldrich's last recorded vision, a map, a prophecy, a warning. It pulsed faintly with sky glow and ink tears. 3. Beneath the salt light. Meanwhile, in the flooded halls of tide-locked hall, salt candles guttered in defiance of the eternal mist. Eryndor Vehlon swam through the half-submerged sanctum of shells, her robes trailing like sea foam. Behind her, shadows moved, silent tide callers, their mouths stitched with whisper barnacles, their minds netted to her own. The Sea Dream. Chapter 9. Ember of the Unwritten. Location: Aether-Zarr, the Charred Spires. Perspective: House Veltharn, heir of House Veltharn. Time: same night. The ritual engine is reactivated. The night inside Aether-Zarr did not descend like other nights. It seeped. Molten light from volcanic terraces shimmered against the high obsidian walls, and shadows danced in erratic patterns like they knew stories they refused to share. Inside the hall of pulse glass, 9-year-old House Veltharn lay on a basalt dais, surrounded by echo words. His tiny frame glowing faintly beneath the amber runes etched into the ceiling above him. He was sleeping, but not dreaming. He was remembering something that hadn't happened yet. In his dream, the sky cracked like pottery. From the wound spilled fire, not of this world. It curled through clouds, not burning them, but speaking to them. Then the voice came. It wasn't a voice in the way thunder has a voice, or the way parents speak in bedtime lies. This voice carved meaning into the marrow of his soul. You are the key that does not wish to turn. The words echoed inside his ribs. He stood older, taller in the dream, but his shadow was that of a dragon or a god or something still becoming. Before him, across a landscape of ash dunes and broken hourglasses, towered a structure of bone and glass and breath. It pulsed. Chapter 10. Face of ash, knife of thought. Location: Aether-Zarr, the Ember Cloisters. Perspective: a veiled hand. Assassin. Codename: Vaish. He moved like the absence of memory. No sound, no scent, no reflection. Only the faint distortion of heat when he passed between torches, as though the flames themselves could not decide whether to acknowledge him. His name was once a noble's curse, then a scholar's plea. Now it was reduced to a whisper, carved inside a glass tooth. Vaish, one of the eldest of the veiled hands. His face had been taken long ago, replaced by a mirror mask etched with runes only readable by blood. Tonight, he wore ash-dusted leathers stitched from the shadows of burned saints. In his hand, a needle dagger forged from memory steel, designed to pierce ritual sigils as easily as skin. Objective: confirm House Veltharn's awakening. Extract genetic ritual residue. Exfiltrate before dawn. No witnesses, no blood, unless ordered. He crept through the ember cloisters, narrow arcades lined with phoenix bone columns and enchanted fire urns that hummed like breathing lungs. Each flame pulsed with a faint echo of Sarathor's heartbeat. The boy's presence radiated like a sun behind doors. It was not hard to track him, but it was hard to reach him. The Ash Guard, who stood stationed at the antechamber of the boy's sanctum, silent sentinels, cloaked in coal-black scale and wielding flame glaives burning with contained infernos. Vaish whispered a syllable only heard by shadows. The floor answered. He sank into the stone, becoming smoke, then glass, then memory. When he emerged on the other side, he was inside the sanctum, and the boy was watching him, not scared, curious, glowing. "You're not real," Sarathor said. He sat upright in bed, eyes golden and... Chapter 11. Whispers Beneath the Lore Veil. Location: the Skyhold Chamber, Metropolis 10, Neutral Ground. Perspective: Dual POV, Saga Cael'Rhun and Thress. Eryndor. The Skyhold Chamber was not built by hands. It hung, impossibly suspended, between two leyline fractures, a floating prism of pale obsidian and star metal veins, always dimly lit, even when unlit, as if memory itself shone here. Only those bound by blood or oath could step inside, and tonight 2 lineages entered under both. Saga Cael'Rhun, dressed in the ink-feathered formal wear of her exiled house, arrived with scrolls braided into her sleeves. She walked with the stillness of someone who could speak volumes without breath. Across the mirrored floor, Thress Eryndor reclined on a glyph throne, conjured of red smoke and glass. His eyes, dark rubies set into ivory skin, glinted behind the translucent veil that marked his title, Ruby Prince, Regent of Metropolis 10. Between them stood an artifact older than Metropolis itself, the Lore Veil Codex, a living book whose pages changed based on intention and deceit. Its glyphs shimmered as both parties approached. Saga bowed with a scholar's grace. Your shadows linger long, Thress. I've counted 3 since you entered. Only one breathes. Thress smiled without teeth. House Cael'Rhun always did read ghosts too well. The Codex pulsed. Why summon me? Saga asked, circling the room like a stalking philosopher. Because your sky bleeds stain my ley routes, Thress replied, and because Oriana has begun humming again. Saga froze. Oriana, the Ruby Queen's mind had been entombed within the Ruby Throne since the shattering of Highspire. Her thoughts, mad, magnificent, lethal, were meant to remain sealed. She hums like a hymn of names not yet born. Thress tapped a finger on the air, and the codex shifted. A map unfurled, the crimson spiral, an arcane forecast of future civil fractures. Sabrine's face remained unreadable, but inside, her breath had gone cold. The spiral has Sarathor's name on it, she whispered. And Aldrich's, Thress replied. They let the names hang in the chamber like suspended knives. Suddenly, the codex flashed. A single word scrawled itself in living flame across the map. Remnant. Both rulers stiffened. Saga, I thought the remnant was sealed beneath the wind bastion. That's where the engine died. Chapter 12. The Bell That Dreams. Location: Tidelocked Hall, Deep Water Coast. Perspective: Aether-Zarr, Vehlon. The sea dreamed. Tone: deep dream horror. Surrealist mysticism. Awakening. The sea had stopped breathing. Aether-Zarr Vehlon knew this before the servants did, before the oracle chorals dimmed, even before the dream whales silenced their songs. She felt it in the roots of her hair, in her bones, ancient as drowned temples, in her first breath of waking, saltless. For the first time in 3 centuries, the deep water bell had begun to toll, not loudly, not like a sailor's warning, but softly, like the ocean whispering a secret it could no longer bear. Dong, dong, dong. And with each chime, the sea forgot a name. She stood at the edge of her shell-throned observatory, draped in whisper kelp robes, glowing faintly with bioluminescent tide ink. Her hair drifted like wet silk behind her, and in her hands she held a conch, inscribed with dream-etched sigils. Behind her, her son, House Vehlon, the tide-bound revenant, hovered in the tank of memory brine. His glassy skin shimmered with translucent coral veins, and his eyes flickered with a starlight no longer found in this world. "He's calling." Euphoria spoke aloud, not to her son, but to the sea itself. "Who?" came the voice of the Salt Mother, emerging from below with robes that hissed like boiling foam. "The drowned prince? The Leviathan? The one who sleeps beneath the remnant?" Euphoria shook her head. "No, the bell doesn't call to dead gods. It mourns something still alive." They moved together through the Hall of Depth Scripture, where tablets of eel skin and ink recorded dreams from generations of Vehlon seers. With every bell chime, one tablet cracked. By the fifth chapter 13, Salt and Ember. Location, Tide-Locked Hall, Deepwater Coast. Perspective, Tide Caller Ivan Cien, Diplomatic Commander of House Vehlon. Tone, political tension, cultural contrast, mystical dread. The tides argued that day. Waves reared and fell with unnatural cadence, as if the ocean could not make up its mind to permit passage or to swallow it whole. Tide Caller Ivan Cien, commander of the Salt Envoy, stood upon the whispering deck of the Night Current, a long vessel carved from the bones of an elder Leviathan. Its sails were stitched from storm skin, translucent and whispering scripture only the deep could hear. Around him, his crew performed rites with obsessive precision. Sea blessings, salt ink sigils along the hull, offerings to Kilneth, the Dreamtide Serpent. The journey to Aether-Zarr was not just perilous by sea, it was a collision of belief where House Vehlon dreamt in ink and tide. House Veltharn breathed prophecy through fire. The two had not met in council since the Phoenix Wars. Ivan watched as the tide-bound warriors of the drowned court loaded crates sealed with coral wax. Inside, fragments of broken dream pearls, samples of memory kelp, a preserved song beast heart, the last, still beating one taken from the Leviathan graveyard. These were not gifts, they were proof of the message the Deepwater Bell had delivered, that two names, Aldrich and Serathor, now echoed beneath even the sea. As he turned, a tendril of cold mist wound itself around his ankle. Prophecy rots faster on the surface, came a voice, the wave seer, an elder woman, skin translucent, her veins inked in spiraling sea glyphs. "If you carry the message wrong," she whispered, "they'll burn it before they understand it." Ivan nodded grimly. Then a summons was sent to the unburned Duchess, and from the topmost terrace of Aether-Zarr, Evangeline Veltharn turned her head from the flames, then let the sea speak. Chapter 14. The Voice in the Flame. Location, the Ember Cradle beneath Aether-Zarr. Perspective, Serathor Veltharn, age 9. Tone, unearthly, mythic dread, childlike awe. Emerging dark sentience. The fire knew his name before his mother did. House Veltharn, heir of flame and shadow, did not sleep the way others did. Sleep was a negotiation, a shared silence between body and inheritance. Beneath Aether-Zarr, in a chamber sealed since before even Veilrath's final roar, the ember cradle pulsed with slow, living heat. Its walls wept rivulets of glowing magma that formed runes in ancient tongue, and only Sarathor could read them because they changed for him and because they answered. Tonight, he sat cross-legged before the heart pyre, a living flame that rose from a well of molten truth. It whispered in multiple voices, none of them human. Sarathor tilted his head. Why do you call me Prince of Ash if I haven't ruled anything yet? The fire coiled and laughed like a serpent exhaling. Because what burns once is lost. What burns twice becomes law. He didn't understand the words, not fully, but he felt them. He had begun to feel everything. When the deep water bell rang beneath the sea, he had wept salt tears he didn't know he owned. When Aldrich's name echoed in a passing raven's cry, his bones vibrated. When Oriana hummed in the ley winds of Metropolis, his breath turned to vapor. The world was whispering in riddles, and only Sarathor could hear every voice at once. From behind a lattice of flame glass. Chapter 15. The Salt Envoy. Location: the Red Summit Hall. Aether-Zarr. Perspective: Evangeline Veltharn, the Unburned Duchess. Tone: political tension, restrained mythology. Diplomacy on the edge of prophecy. The floor hissed with heat as water-beaded boots crossed it. Tide caller Evon Cairn removed his kelp-threaded mantle as he bowed low. His skin steamed against the volcanic stone. Behind him stood the Salt Envoy, Dreambinders, Leviathan Whisperers, and two mute salt priests with opal-veined coral masks. They were gifts of vision, not protection, because in Aether-Zarr, no guard could save you from truth wrapped in flame. Atop the throne of coal sat Evangeline Veltharn, her presence a pressure, a horizon that glowed with the memory of firestorms. Her hair, bound in obsidian hoops, swayed as if caught in heatless wind. Her dress shimmered with a lattice of flame-forged lace, woven from Ethrion's last feathers. She spoke without preamble. The sea dreams again, and it dreams of my son. Evon did not flinch. Instead, he opened the coral reliquary. Inside, the memory pearl, now dulling, its shine receding like a tide retreating from a blood-stained shore. The bell tolls beneath the drowned gods. It said two names, Aldrich, Sarathor. The Sea Duchess is remembering futures, and it fears them. Evangeline stepped down, barefoot. The lava floor did not burn her. She circled the pearl, gaze narrowing. You speak as if the tide carries prophecy, but I know prophecy. It bleeds, it lies, it dreams, Evon said quietly, and some dreams cannot be drowned. From the upper gallery, Sarathor watched, hidden behind ritual screens. He held a candle that did not burn. It listened. He heard every word, and in his mind, the flame stirred again. Chapter 16. The Crimson Pulse. Location: High Spire Crownhold, Inner Metropolis 10. Perspective: Thress Eryndor, the Ruby Prince. Tone: political horror, mythic possession, unraveling control. They told Thress Eryndor that the Ruby Throne was silent, that Oriana had long since passed into relic and whisper, that the red web, the living sigil laced into the walls, was inert. They lied. The first omen was a heartbeat. He felt it not in his chest, but beneath the floor, like an inverted drum pulsing up through the soles of his boots, setting teeth on edge and thoughts on fire. The second omen came when the mirrored faces of his veiled hands began to crack. Not the masks, but the reflections themselves. Each distortion showed not his face, but hers. Oriana, crowned in stillborn dusk, her eyes two polished rubies bleeding memory. Thress stood before the Ruby Throne. It pulsed faintly, casting glimmers on the blood marble pillars. The room stank of old magic and something more recent, the sour scent of awakened grief. The throne spoke, not with sound, with command. A single word, etched in every candle flame and breath of air: bleed. And so he did, without question, without hesitation. Thress drew a slender blade from his sleeve and opened his palm, letting blood drip onto the veins carved in the stone. The blood script ignited, crawling like a fever across the chamber walls. The Ruby Court gasped, those not already entranced. The Crimson Nun, her face hidden behind a bone-stitched veil, stepped forward, trembling. "The Queen is not gone," she rasped. "She is waking." Elsewhere in the Crownhold, the spine lilies bloomed, flowers that only opened in the presence of high cursecraft. They hissed, exhaling clouds of memory spores that danced like glass dust in ritual corridors. The flesh scribes' parchments burned of their own accord, rewriting themselves in older tongues, and from the lower vaults came the echo of chains snapping. Thress staggered down from the throne, pale and smiling, not his smile. "Prepare the high web," he said in a voice that was his and wasn't. "Call back the Crimson Parliament and summon the Eye that weeps." The court moved in silence, because the Queen, the blood-forged spider of prophecy and rebellion, was not dead. She was returning through her heir. Above the throne, the stained glass dome fractured, a sliver of dusklight. Epilogue: The Murmuring Vein. Location: the vein, deep beneath the roots of the world. Perspective: House Cael'Rhun. Tone: surreal, mythic time or fading identity, epic introspection. Audric had forgotten how long he'd been falling, not through space, but through meaning. The vein deep was no place. It was the marrow of memory, the sediment of shattered ages, compressed into something deeper than time. Here, breath was an afterthought, and names bled like ink across an unseen sky. His fingers dragged across obsidian vines that pulsed with memory. Some his, some borrowed, some stolen. Every touch sang, "You are not meant to return. You left the ink unfinished. He burns, she watches. You were the map." The voices came not as sound, but as color. Cerulean regret, scarlet envy, violet warnings. Aldrich clutched his ribs, where his runes had begun to fade, as if his own story was being erased. He collapsed before a shrine that shouldn't exist, a spire of living bone, growing from a pool of melted vellum. Its base was carved with two names, over and over: Sarathor, Oriana. Sarathor, Oriana. Sarathor, Oriana. He reached for the spire. The bone recoiled, then pulsed, and the world around him fractured. He saw Sarathor, asleep, wrapped in coils of fire that sang lullabies older than the moon. Oriana, staring through Thress's skin with red-lit eyes, ruling again without needing flesh. The old gods, watching, waiting. The new god, faceless still, whose breath was already warping prophecy like hot wax. Aldrich screamed, but the sound came out as parchment unraveling. The vein deep tasted the scream. It murmured back, ancient and cruel. "We are not done with you, Cartomancer. The map has not finished you yet." Above him, far above, a voice not of the vein, but of the sky reached him like a single drop of rain in the desert. Sabrine, calling, desperate. "Aldrich, come back. You're not done."
Chapter 17. The Prince Who Wasn't Yet. Location unknown. A mirrored dream sanctum on the edge of the vein deep. Perspective, the eye that weeps. Seer of the Crimson Parliament. Tone, prophetic, fevered, tragic beauty, apocalyptic awe. The eye that weeps had bled from her left socket for 7 days. She stood on a floor of shattered timelines, where each shard was a reflection of what could never be, and some of what must be. Her blood ran like ink down her chin, pooling in the grooves of 1,000 failed futures. In the silence of her trance, she whispered a name she had never heard before. He does not wear a crown. He wears a scar. Around her, reality trembled. The Ruby Parliament dared not disturb her vigil. The candles around her flickered in reverse, burning wax back into flesh. She was deep in the dreaming fault line now, deeper even than Oriana had ever dared descend. And she saw him, a boy, not yet a man, standing on the broken bridge between 2 continents, long divided by flame and myth. The sea hissed beneath him, not with salt, but with names, trying to forget themselves. He held no sword, only a banner, half burned, half frozen. Its sigil was not of any house, but every house's colors shimmered within it, just out of sync. Behind him, giants in chains, wolves with shattered halos, and the ashes of cities no one remembered building. Ahead of him, dragons weeping at his feet. The king who will not rule, the eye whispered. The fire that does not burn, the peace that does not beg. And from his shadow, 2 other figures emerged, one cloaked in starlight, a twin of the flame, a whisper of Sarathor, the other veiled in blood silk, a daughter of Ruby, reflection of Oriana. He is not heir, the eye said. He is answer. Chapter 18. The Banner Without House. Final chapter of Episode 1, Season 3. Tone, prophetic revelation, mythic weight, slow burning upheaval. In the 7 corners of the fractured world, something ancient shifted, not a tremor, not an omen, a reversal. The river beside Highspire began to flow backward, and for one night, the stars over the charred spires did not blink. In the wind bastions, the spell moss turned black. In the drowned coast, the dream whales sang in chorus for the first time in